Is a tab is there or any other way to connect to Zoom?
Okay, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcoming you all to another session of HIS Ignites Minds. As I've said before, these sessions are completely for our children to get inspired from individuals who have made it big in their life at a very short interval of time, but have made noteworthy achievements in the duration of life that they have lived. And this session is a Abdul Kalam special, and we remember with gratitude and respect and reverence the genius, the scientist, the people's president, and the much loved Bharat Ratna Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam on this very special World Students' Day. And what more could be more befitting than to have this session on this session two very, I will not say eminent, but a very famous two research scientists who are still making it big in the field of science and technology. I have the pleasure of welcoming Ms. A. Sai Venkat Lakshmi, who is a scientist engineer, head artificial intelligence and machine learning systems, Advanced Data Processing and Research Institute, Department of Space, ISRO, Government of India. And I also have Ms. Jayashree Sridhar, who is a research scientist herself. And at the moment, before I go into her details, at the moment she's a research scientist doing her applied mathematics to statistics on shear fingering convection in stellar interiors. Now, if I have to read her profile, actually, it'll take me a minimum of 5 minutes. So, Jayashree, I'll be very choosy in what I talk about you, but I'll quickly go through the introductions of both the speakers, and then we will leave the floor to them because we want to hear more of them. As I mentioned, Ms. Sai Lakshmi is a scientist at ISRO. She joined ISRO in 1997 and she currently heads Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning Systems in Advanced Data Processing and Research Institute, Department of Space, Government of India. She is involved in design and development of solutions in areas of geospatial technology, databases, remote sensing, advanced data processing and exploitation systems for satellite imagery using artificial intelligence and machine learning. This sounds Greek and Latin to me, but I'm sure the children of this millennial understand it much better than what I would do. She was invited as a speaker at the 14th Triennial National Conference for Indian Women Scientists Association in 2019. The theme was Women-led Science, Technology and Innovation. Her talk was on role of women in science and technology. The major solutions that she has created, for which she has won quite a number of awards, are multi-sensor planner for disaster management, Pranav software hosted on ISRO's website to aid users in requesting for RIS-81 imagery, ontology-based framework developed for geospatial data interoperability between projects. Her awards, amongst the many, are she's won the NCERT scholarship for being on the top of the country in her 10th grade marks, the Young Engineer Award in 2008, jointly by Government of Andhra Pradesh, instituted for engineers for outstanding contribution in the field of geospatial technology. Her Best Paper Award in International Map World Forum 2009, and her work has been catalogued in the ISRO's list of innovations 2005 to 2010. Ms. Sai Venkat Lakshmi, it is definitely our honor and privilege to have you on board with us on this very special day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
She is still figuring out the way to appear on screen.
Hey, Bharti, you can see me now, I'm sure. I joined through mobile as Sai Lakshmi.
Okay. I don't know if the others are able to see, but I'm not able to see.
Yes, okay. We can see her.
Brilliant. I think there's a problem with me. People are going on space and we are still figuring out to see people on our systems. Jayashree Sridhar, in short, I remember as a student in one of our science expos where Dr. Kalam was the chief guest. He was so enamored by the experiment that she had done that I think he spent maximum amount of time at her stall or at her space, giving her almost about 15 to 20 minutes. And I think that's where she started off as a research scientist. And today she's got too many on the list to be spoken of. In short, she's a doctoral student and researcher who works predominantly in areas of astrophysics, earth and planetary sciences. She has worked in several national laboratories, including Astromaterials Research and Science Exploration Office at NASA Johnson Space Center and National Aerospace Laboratories. She is a recipient of many a prestigious scholarship and awards. And as I mentioned, she is at the moment doing her master's in applied mathematics and statistics at the University of California. At SRM University, she's already finished her master's in MTech in remote sensing and GIS. And let me tell you, all the records that I read, she's already got a first class with distinction. At London, Ontario, Canada, at Western University, she did a project on shock metamorphism and Martian meteorites. And I'm very proud to mention that she was an alumnus at our Hindustan University, where she has done her aerospace engineering and passed out in May 2013 with a first class and distinction. Jayashree, if I read more, as I said, I'll run short of time, but I definitely want to mention a few of your awards. Student Award at NASA Lunar Science Forum, NASA in California in 2011. International Conference on Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering, Kuala Lumpur. Travel Award for Lunar Exploration Group Meeting at Houston, 2009. Travel Award for Joint Annual Meeting at Cape Canaveral in 2008. She was the winner of the International Astronautical Congress in Hyderabad, 2007. International Prize in Category 2 European Southern Observatory Catch a Star Competition in Germany, 2006. International First Prize in Royal Astronomical Society Newspaper Design Competition on Global Warming, London, 2005. And the list goes on. And I can only wish Jayashree many, many more moments of accolades to come. From all of us at Hindustan International School, Jayashree, we wish you the best in the times ahead, right? So coming quickly to our session today, may I kindly request Ms. Venkat Lakshmi to begin the session and talk a bit about herself and her journey as a scientist so far. Venkat Lakshmi, over to you.
Thank you, Bharti and Hindustan International for giving me this opportunity to be here. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here today to talk to young, eager minds and also to the respected teachers. Actually, I have completed 20 years in ISRO and I never realized I did unless I was speaking to her. So my journey, you can understand, has overall been exciting, interesting, though it's had its shares of ups and downs. But overall, I'm happy I chose this and I'm glad I'm here. So all of us wonder about space right from childhood, right? Gazing at the twinkling stars in the sky and the soothing moon. And we always feel, no, wherever we go, a moon is following us. So all of us feel so special at that time. However, as we grow up, we interact with space in a different way. So coming to actually when you work in space related areas, there are mainly two parts, okay? The science part, you know, what are the planets, astronomy, astrophysics, you know, what are the galaxies out there, etc. And then you have the engineering part. So like building satellites, building applications related to space. So ISRO is mostly about the second part, harnessing space for national development. So where all do we use satellites? We use it without realizing actually. Weather prediction, the GPS on our phone, television, remote sensing, disaster management. And then we have, ISRO also came up with several projects like tele-education, telemedicine, search and rescue. These are the major activities where you see satellites. And I'll talk a little about the work culture in ISRO. So there is no difference between men and women as such. It's only your merit. Nowhere is the gender discussed actually. In fact, if required, you have to take the last flight from Delhi or take the early morning flight. So you are on par in every way. Then actually ISRO has 6 major centers and around 15 smaller centers. So what I want to tell is, you know, every work in here is like, you know, your group projects in your classrooms, especially like now, you have to have online discussions and reviews and, you know, monitor the progress. So most of our projects are like this. We have to work differently, but in a coherent way. The next thing is, you know, ISRO works with much smaller budgets than NASA or any other agency if you take from space. So we have to continuously innovate. Given the limited resources, we have to make the best utilization. So you have time and monetary limits, but you have good scope for research. So just to give a case in point, you can take a Mars mission. So actually we have 2 launches, okay? One vehicle is 2000 kgs it can take up to 1000 kilometers. And another one is GSLV, it can take 5000 kgs up to 36,000 kilometers. But now we wanted to go to Mars, which is like 62 million kilometers. So you can imagine how can you do it with this, right? So it requires a lot of fuel, heavy payloads, and a lot of work. So we did this also in an innovative way. Instead of directly going there like the other countries, we had multiple transfer orbits. So it's like you have a ball in your hand, you rotate it very fast multiple times and then leave it. So then it goes much further, right? So we use this technology, and India is the first country to reach Mars orbit in its first attempt, and in this unique way. And you can imagine the budget of this orbiter was 11% of NASA's Maven orbiter. So you can understand the satisfaction that comes and the challenges. So you can see that ISRO is making big strides in its own unique way. And then another thing is you have to prepare for extreme conditions for our satellites. So it is very hot and very cold. So when you are building your materials, when you are building your satellite payloads, these electronics, they have to work at very high and very cold temperatures and many uncertainties, because you can't actually simulate the space system. And unlike our phone or any other software which we develop here, you cannot correct it in space if it's not working. So a lot of assumptions you make, so a lot of background studies and simulations go on. Of course, sometimes things do fail, but most of the time we have given our best. And our designation in technical areas is actually scientist/engineer. So actually this speaks everything. It is a mix of research and solutions which we have to develop under operational constraints. Coming to applications, okay, one area that is very close to my heart is disaster management, because now we are able to predict cyclones, and because of that we are able to take many precautions. And though property we are not able to save, human lives, we are able to save a lot because of this little advanced knowledge that we are getting. And I had actually developed a software which predicts the earliest satellite that reaches a given area. So this was very satisfying, because under disaster management we have a consortium of multiple countries, and when we know that which satellite is coming there, we could actually ask them strongly, come on, we need this data and you have to give it to us now, types. And then floods, flood inundation, damage, all these things, actually satellite data is used, because how much the area is inundated we don't know, and how many people we may have to rescue, where to put the resources for rescue, all these things, urban planning. There are many actually applications of satellite data. Coming to some firsts that ISRO has achieved, with Chandrayaan-1 mission, we could detect the presence of water molecules on the moon. However, it was, though the Indian scientists first detected it, in consultation with NASA, jointly they confirmed it. Then coming to the Mars mission, as I told you, we were the first one which reached in a very unique way. Then we also have the GSLV rocket, which is very strong. And it is like equivalent of 200 fully grown elephants. So you can just imagine how huge that is. And another first of ours was we could launch 104 satellites in a single launch, which is a world record. Okay, so we have become so reliable in our launching, especially that now others are offering others are coming to us for launching their satellites, because it is coming at almost 10% of the original cost. And actually ISRO started 50 years back. That is actually 15th August 1969. And the motto was promote space for national development, pursue space for national development. But more recently, we have also explored interplanetary missions, because somewhere we want to also get into the world league, as they say. So we also have Gaganyaan, Chandrayaan-2, Mangalyaan-2 coming up. We also have many international partnerships, like I told you, for disaster management. And then Chandrayaan-1 carried NASA instruments. And then we have many partnerships with NASA, with Japan, there is JAXA, and many other countries. Coming to how could you join ISRO? Hopefully you're interested in joining there by now.
After listening to you, definitely.
Yeah. So the projects are all interdisciplinary. So you can have background in aerospace, electronics, communication, material science, chemistry, computer science, maths, physics, statistics, geography, geoscience, remote sensing. So the projects involved require all this expertise. So any of them can get you here. Though you have a college, Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology in Trivandrum, that is one way you can join. Otherwise also there is direct recruitment. Another thing is a lot of privatization happening in ISRO now. So for the next generation, if you're interested, a lot of small satellite launch vehicles and then private firms coming up in Bangalore and Chennai to launch vehicles. That is the small sats or CubeSats, what they call. Like from Chennai itself, there was this KalamSat V2. It is the lightest satellite that has been launched by ISRO for free. It is 10 centimeters cube, and they have done a good work in terms of experimenting new things. Okay, so a lot of scope for anyone interested out there. Then we also have, as a government policy, we also have two new things coming up in space. That is Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. This is basically to encourage students, universities, and private sector to launch their own satellites. Let's say to utilize ISRO facilities if they want to test what they have done and that kind of thing. Okay. We also have NSIL, that is a New Space India Limited public company. Here there are two kinds of players. Like there are already major players like maybe Godrej or HAL, which provide parts. But now they can also get into actual integration of satellites. You also have new startups like Pixel, Earth to Orbit, and many more. So these will also be given more freedom to work in the space sector. Just to give an idea that how are our projects, the budget of Avengers Endgame was 2,400 crores. Okay, the budget of our resource sat, which is a remote sensing satellite, was 230 crores. Okay, then the budget of Avatar was 3,000 crores. However, our Chandrayaan mission, it was 386 crores. So just to understand that we cannot take, although other agencies have developed software, satellites and spacecrafts and so many missions, we cannot use them directly because India is in a unique place. So we take some technology from there, we apply our own ideas, our own innovations, and we make it work for our country. So that is in short my journey in ISRO.
Venkatalakshmi, you know, I mean, I think I'm voicing out everyone's thoughts at the moment. We would have read all these statistical data and all these stories, either watched in movies or probably read in newspapers. But having someone from ISRO talk about all this, it feels so real, actually, honestly. And you put it in such simple terms, and I'm sure my children are equally inspired. But I want to know one thing here is, how much has Dr. Kalam influenced you on your journey from as a student to being a scientist now?
Okay, so actually Kalam was involved in space in the early years of ISRO development. So by then I have not even joined actually. However, we have heard stories of how he inspired people. He worked day in and day out, and just by seeing him work, people were forced to be there, and be with him, and just seeing his enthusiasm. Because in the formative years, they don't know things will work, won't work, but just our sheer enthusiasm of, let's say, college and school children. It was like that they have worked, put in many hours, and finally they make things work. And another interaction of not me directly, but my brother. He was a researcher in physics laboratory in Sri Satya Institute of High Learning. So Kalam paid a visit there when he had come for the convocation. And he was very happy to see that they had some optics instruments which are not generally available in other universities here. And he was so happy, and he said, this is the way to be, that we have to get the technology here, but we have to build our own solutions. We should not depend on others for solutions. We have to learn it and apply it uniquely for our own, problems and techniques. So that way, I think he was a great inspiration to all at ISRO and India in general, I suppose.
I think that's what, the more higher you go up, the simplicity of a human being comes to forte. I associate Dr. Kalam that way, for the man that he is, for the genius that he is, and the kind of humility that he had, and the kind of solution that he carried of believing in your homeland is so much admirable. Venkatalakshmi, thank you so much for that first few words of inspiration from you. And I think we will listen to Jayashree for some time now and then come back to you again.
Sure.
Jayashree, we're all yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful opportunity. It's my pleasure to share this with Sai Venkatalakshmi, ma'am, on this platform. She is such an inspirational person for all of us. So to begin with, my journey started in my school. So from an astronomy summer camp in my 7th grade. So that's how I started my journey in this field. And I am sure that all of you students are in the right place as of now. So it's time for you people to, figure out your goals and dreams and what you want to do in your life, because the school plays a very crucial and important role, as it did for me in my case. So Bharati ma'am told about the Science Expo where Dr. Kalam was the chief guest. But there was an incident before that. That was the first time I met him. So I would like to share my experiences with him, because I have met him for like 3 to 4 times during my school, during my college, and I've had interactions with him. And he actually encouraged me. So the things which I have done today, I would say, it's because of the encouragement he gave me. So to begin with, the first time I met him was in the International Astronautical Congress in 2007. So how I went there, so that's another story, because it was...
Deshi, how old were you then?
I was in 11th grade, so just passed out 10th.
10th.
Yeah. So what happened was ISRO conducted a nationwide talent hunt where they were selecting students from 11th grade to PhD level to represent the country in an international platform, that is for the International Astronautical Congress. So at that time, I actually completed my 9th. I was not even in my 10th standard, but still I was thinking that because they mentioned the Congress is in September 2007. So by that time I would be in 11th standard. So I thought, okay, why not give it a try? Because the entire selection process took about more than a year. So the first level was like they had a written examination, and second level, they gave us a topic and we were asked to write some research essay. And then the third level was we had to do some presentation, and then we had a personal interview, and we had group discussions which were conducted in various centers of ISRO. So we had levels of, competitions in order to be selected. So, but finally what happened was I was the youngest candidate who got selected in the entire South India. So then I happened to go to that Congress, and I represented the country. So in that event, there was this really special thing where we had this address by Dr. Kalam. So everyone was so excited about that event that even the foreign delegates who had attended that conference, they were also looking forward to this one particular event. And many school students participated, and we 50 students who were selected by ISRO, we were also a part of that. So what we were told by ISRO is that we are supposed to write down our questions to Dr. Kalam. And the condition was that Dr. Kalam will be selecting the question, and he will be answering only 3 questions. So we never know who he's going to pick. So this kind of condition was placed by ISRO. So what we did is we all handed over our questions, and the actual day came in. And when he came and he went to the stage, the very first thing he said was, I want to talk to Ms. Jayashree Sridhar from Chennai, Tamil Nadu, on an international conference where everyone are waiting for him. This was the first thing that came out. And I was for a moment taken aback, and I was like, is he really calling me, or is he calling someone else? Because I couldn't, believe it myself that he's actually calling me. So everyone around me were like, go, 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 it's you. You're the lucky girl, go, 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 go. And then like I went, and then like he told me that your question is very interesting. And he was like, I know your question, but I want you to ask in front of everyone so that everyone also knows what exactly was your question is. So then I told him, my question to you was, why is space technology not so popular among the public of this country? And the answer he gave me was, it's the duty of people like you who have to make it popular. So that was the thing he told me. And then I was like, okay, on that day I decided I should do something to make this space technology really famous among the people of this country. And I started my aerospace engineering. And so that was my undergraduate. So what happened is after this event, within 3 to 4 months, we had the Science Expo in my school. And apparently he was the chief guest again. So the moment he entered the campus, he came directly to my stall, which was totally unexpected again. And the very first thing he said was, I've seen you somewhere.
Oh my God.
And then I told him, we just met in the conference 3 months back. And then he asked me, so what have you come up with this time? He asked me. Then I told him, So I'm thinking about having a colony on the moon, and I'm thinking about exploring the moon and all those things I was telling him. And he was like, you know what? You shouldn't stop at the moon. You're born to achieve more than that. So don't just stop here. Go beyond moon and explore whatever you can and as much as you can. And I was like, okay, sir, I will do it. And so looking, it's been like almost 13 years. So now thinking back and looking at the position I am right now, I think I have fulfilled the words because I have worked on moon,
Honestly.
I have worked on Mars, I worked on stars, and I have worked on meteorites, and I worked on every single object.
Wherever
And
Dr. Kalam is now, I'm sure he must be blessing you, honestly.
thank you,
So,
ma'am.
so proud of you. Great.
Yeah, so I had these kind of experiences with him. So I'm sure he is an inspiration for many of us, and he is, of course, an inspiration to me. And with his massive encouragement, I'm able to, do all sorts of things like that. So what I would tell you people also to, as he says, dream big, and you shall get there someday, definitely.
Jayashree, you had some nice pictures to share, if I remember.
Yeah.
Mr. Vijay and Hamid, if you could just share the pictures, Jayashree will tell us the stories behind them. So Kyle is helping us share pictures. Nice.
Yeah, this was that Science Expo.
That moment.
Yeah, the moment.
Well, he looks so fascinated with the simple things that you tell him.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually showing him the picture of the Congress where we met
Okay.
last time.
Kyle, we can go to the next picture, please. Yeah. Next, please. I wonder what this is now. You'll have to tell us.
Yeah, so this is at the Johnson Space Center where they have this curation facilities, where they have these samples from moon, they have these meteorites, and all the other space objects which are being preserved. So this is that place. This is a curation room. And what I'm wearing is called the bunny suit, which everyone is
Bunny
supposed to
suit.
wear in order to get inside.
Okay. I hope someday many of my children from Hindustan will be there.
Yeah,
Definitely.
definitely.
Okay, next picture, please. Okay, at the Johnson Space Center.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Next, please.
This
Is
was
this the
at the
same
Ames.
thing? And what is the story behind this? What exactly did you do here, Jayashree?
Here, I was presenting my research on moon. So this was basically a forum which we have, which specializes only in lunar sciences. So I was presenting my work over there, and this is where I won my student award.
Brilliant. Next picture, please. Okay. Now, whom are you giving a handshake now?
Oh, that's a Robonaut, and it actually is in the International Space Station (ISS), and it is capable of doing anything. So if I tell the Robonaut that I want to give a handshake, so automatically he will start giving a handshake, and then we both actually did exercise together. So both of us were carrying dumbbells, and the moment I lift my right arm, and he will also lift his right arm. So it is capable of doing whatever a human does, and they are present in the ISS, and whenever the astronauts are not there, and they usually take care of the things.
Brilliant. Oh my God. I think every picture of yours has a voluminous story to tell.
Yeah.
Next picture. Okay, we are back on land in Hindustan. Jayashree, that's amazing to hear. And both you and Venkatalakshmi ma'am, I think, have done remarkable and marvelous jobs, and you're still in the process. Now, before we go ahead, I think many of my children have questions to ask, and so do have my teachers to ask. I think that will lead the entire show ahead. And we have one nice little boy, Shreyan, saying, I want to go to NASA. Shreyan, you shall definitely go, son. Our best wishes go with you. Brilliant. Okay, I have my first question coming from my physics teacher, Miss Tina.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, Jayashree, ma'am. My question is for you. See, the universe is accelerating and it is accelerating faster than the speed of light. Why is then the Andromeda approaching to us? And what is the source of accelerating space?
Oh, this is entirely not in my domain because I can't.
Will
do,
Venkat Lakshmi be able to take this?
Actually, Baru, I prefer not.
Yeah, because
Okay.
such
Because
Tina,
questions.
I don't want to give, a random answer.
Random answer, exactly.
Tina, what
Exactly.
we'll do is we will leave the question with both the scientists and probably they can come back to us with the answer in some time.
Yes,
Right?
that
I'm
definitely,
sure they
definitely.
will. Scientists
Yes.
that they will not leave it so easily. So they'll definitely come back to us with an answer.
Yes.
To keep the conversation a bit light on this note, I have Gautam asking a very, very interesting question. Gautam, over to you.
Sure, ma'am. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, okay.
Sure.
So my question is as such, opposed to Jayeshi ma'am. If Americans are astronauts, Russians are cosmonauts, Chinese are taikonauts, then what are Indians? And why is there such a difference in the names of the people who go to space? Thank you.
Okay, Indians are called Vyomonauts. I think
Not? Come
that
again?
from
Jayesh, if you can just
Vyomonauts.
type that out for us.
Yeah. It goes with this
Vyomonauts.
thing because it's derived from Sanskrit.
Vyom, that is space.
Yeah, Vyomo means space in Sanskrit.
So
So
we have
usually I
Vyomonauts.
think ISRO goes with the Sanskrit
Terminologies.
Yeah, so if you see even naming the mission for Mars, it's Mangalyan, Mangal, which means Mars. And if you see for Chandrayaan, Chandra means moon.
Chandra, right. We are very
We also
Indian.
have this Shukrayan, which is going to be coming up, in the next few years. That's for Venus because Shukran
God.
means Venus. So
Yes.
they usually use this Sanskrit terms. I think
Yes.
Lakshmi ma'am will be able to, add
Yes,
some more
yes.
things to it.
Yes, we generally try to include Sanskrit because finally it is our heritage, right? So we try to include it wherever possible.
Okay, the next question is coming from Mukhilan to Venkat Lakshmi ma'am.
Hi ma'am, I'm Mukhilan. I'm from grade 9 in HISK, and I have a question on astrophysics. So I've heard about wormholes, ma'am. So is there any traces of existence of wormholes? And if so, is there any possibility of them existing within the reach of us?
Okay, I will answer, but I want Jayashree also to take it again. Okay. So actually, mine is the theoretical knowledge only. So theoretically, our Einstein equations they do support the existence of wormholes, but to my knowledge, experimentally we have not found evidence of them. But how would it be if it happens? No, I think you would see it in Doraemon. No, that anyway door, no? He takes him wherever it wants and you just have a door and you go where you want, but it is in another time and another space. Jayeshi, please tell me. Please add.
Yes, ma'am, I agree with you. It's totally speculative. And as of now, we don't have any evidence of that. But, like last year, how we got the first image of a black hole, which again, proved Einstein was right. So I think maybe in the next few years, we will be able to, have a concrete proof of, existence of wormholes. But as of now, it's all speculative. But there are many hypotheses. So I think we just have to wait and watch.
Right. The time is
Or maybe Mukulan can work on that as he graduates. Right?
Yes, ma'am. I
think that is your next science project.
Interesting. Oh, we have Isaac coming up with a question for both my scientists next.
Ma'am, I'm Isaac from grade 10. My question is, as we know, Chandrayaan-2 was not able to reach the moon on its preferred path. Why was it not able to do so? Was it a mechanical fault or a design fault?
Okay, so it is, I should say, a software fault, but not totally also because we are not able to simulate space conditions fully. So we make certain assumptions, right? So based on our assumptions, the designs are made And among the designs also, what are the conditions you should check for? If you know a little of software, you would understand, no, your boundary conditions, your error conditions, what to do when these things occur, right? So somewhere, though a lot of the conditions have been taken care, some situation which was not catered to, it faced, and because of that, it crash landed rather than a soft landing it was supposed to happen.
Interesting. Okay. We have Ashwin coming up with the next. Jayashree, you're adding on to this?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. So usually any landing on other surfaces is very critical. The last few minutes is actually, as Dr. Shivan says, it's like 15 minutes of terror for any mission. Like take it even for Curiosity, they had this air braking system for landing. They were trying some new technology. So even they were keeping their fingers crossed. So anytime you experiment such things, it's always, things may go anyway.
Okay, the probability.
Yeah.
Ashwin, he comes up with his questions.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Ashwin. I'm in grade 11. So my question is, ma'am, is there a possibility of other life existent form, and can you elaborate on parallel universe?
So life existence, other forms as such, it's an ongoing research, and people have been exploring that possibility for a very long time. And they have this institute called SETI, which is in the US, where many eminent scientists are working on that. But as of now, they don't have any clear evidence of existence of life forms. But they hope that one day they will be able to find one. And I strongly believe life exists in other forms in other worlds also. So that's what I also believe. But as of now, we haven't had enough evidences to prove that existence. And with regards to parallel universe, that's again, a speculation with a lot of people, eminent physicists coming up with a lot of hypotheses regarding the existence of multiverses. But again, there's not much knowledge or much observations that has been done in order to prove their existence. So as of now, everything is possible theoretically.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
We have Harshit coming up next.
Good evening, ma'am. So my question is a bit philosophical, and yet it has a bit of astrophysics in it too, ma'am. So, ma'am, do you believe that we exist in a simulated reality, considering the Goldilocks condition and the anthropic principle?
I am actually out of words. I don't know if Jayashree and Sai, ma'am, share the same thing.
I think even I'm like
Harshit, I want you to repeat that question because it's very interesting, but we would want to listen to it again.
Ma'am, so there's this, ma'am, I'm sure the scientists know about the Goldilocks condition and the anthropic principle, ma'am.
Can you please tell us what that is first?
Ma'am, so all the planets, ma'am, like Earth and like Earth, ma'am, it's in the perfect position, ma'am. If it's a bit more near the sun, it'll die in a heat death, and a bit this side means it'll get all cold and life won't exist, ma'am. And the anthropic principle, it states that we exist in the universe because the universe is made in a way that we can exist in it. So it was fine-tuned for us, we can say that in layman terms. So all this evidence, it points to the fact that we may be living in a simulated reality, like let's say a video game, but a more complicated one. So, but again, over here, physics meets philosophy, right? So
Yes.
I don't know. I wanted to hear the scientist's opinion on that.
Which of my scientists would like to take this question, please? Both of you give your bit of your opinions. It will matter much to my child.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's a very interesting question.
Would you like to come back on that, Jayashree and Sai Lakshmi?
Okay.
I think I have to think for some time.
Yeah, I think we are with Venkat Lakshmi, we are 2 generations apart. With you, we are 1 generation apart. So I think we'll give you these questions, and Harshit, I promise you, they will come back to you with these answers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Sikandar coming up next. Can we have Sikandar? Is Sikandar there? Or we have Tina ma'am waiting to ask another question.
Hello, once again. This is to Sai Venkatalakshmi ma'am. Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
We will be watched and our privacies will be stolen. Okay, the satellites are doing right now. Okay, but what is the threat for the satellite itself apart from space traffic?
Definitely, threat is there. Just like we have security of our homes, our nation, our equipment. Now, because we are having satellite launches and missiles, and several countries have done this anti-satellite tests also. It is definitely a threat. Uh, but hopefully not in the near future because we'll be spoiling space also. Generally, there's a space treaty where everyone is supposed to use space only for peaceful purposes and for the national development, and not to be used for putting on any other country down. There is a space treaty, but as such, countries have the capability that if their missile can go that far, the missiles can go that far, and if they're able to track where the satellite is, then it is a matter of aiming it right, and they can reach it. But however, we have international treaties that prohibit use of space for ulterior motives. It's only for nationals' peaceful cooperation, international cooperation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Right. Thank you, Venkatalakshmi ma'am. Ritika, are you ready with your question?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is for Miss Sai Venkatalakshmi, ma'am. So, ma'am, geospatial technology has been recognized as one of the leading technologies which will lead to the development of science. So, what was your idea behind the development of solution in areas of geospatial technology?
Yeah. So actually, we live in a world where everything is interdisciplinary, right? Like even if you use GPS, you need electronics, you need satellite, you need communication, right? And then you are having IoT kind of smart sensing and these solutions. So, like let's take an example of satellite imagery itself. If you just get an image but you don't know it is of which area, what use is it, right? Or if you want to detect where is some wildfire happening or where is a flood happening, you cannot do anything until you know where is it. So the where is a big question. See, in our olden days, we were limited, at least our grandmothers were limited to that local area, that village, that town perhaps. Whereas now it is global. So once you have globalization and you are having like maybe products created somewhere, manufactured somewhere, sold somewhere else, and finally shipped somewhere else. So in all of these either marketing strategies or satellite imagery or any applications we develop, the where has become the most important now because that only can tell you what else to do about it. So that is how geospatial technologies have also grown. Like I can tell you that example of disaster management. If you want to say which satellite is reaching there first or which area do you want to see first, that is the driving force, right? So that is how in almost every application we have now, not only satellites, anything else also, the where becomes the most important, right? You want to find your nearest restaurant, you want to find your nearest theater, you want to know the distance to railway station. Everywhere the where has become important. So that's how geospatial is now an inherent part of any application, any solution.
Ritika, I hope that answers your. Samiksha is coming up next. Ritika, I hope you're happy with that answer.
Yes, ma'am.
Samiksha. Is Samiksha around? Okay. Gautam had another question actually. Gautam, we would love to hear from the Vyomonaut of our future.
Yes, ma'am. I have another question posed to Ms. Venkatalakshmi. Since gravity is unlimited and immeasurable, can it be thought of and applied as a source of energy? And how can it be feasible if yes?
Actually, in space is vacuum, no? Usually, when you have mass, you have gravity. Okay, I have not really thought about it. I think I'll take that as another question to come back to. Or maybe our astrophysicist can answer.
Jayashree, would you like to take that?
Vyomonaut is coming up with really challenging questions.
Yeah.
So what exactly was your question?
Yes, so my question was, we know that we cannot measure gravity. So won't it just be very convenient for us to apply that as a source and form of energy in space shuttles and spaceships so that it can save on a whole bunch of costs, right?
You mean using gravity as a source of energy to save cost of the mission?
Cost, yes, yes, exactly.
Okay. I don't really think anyone has thought about using gravity as a source of energy as such, because gravity, as ma'am said, you mean it's not found everywhere. It's only on certain planetary bodies where you find gravity. Like in case of moon, you just got like nearly 1/6 of our gravity. And if you see Mars, Mars has got a gravity which is almost equivalent to our Earth. So as of now, that is our only target where we have conditions that are similar as Earth. So maybe in the future we can try and see if that's possible. Because to be very honest, I never thought about it, and I've never heard any mission using gravity as a source. Because there are missions which use laser, and because even they have these laser propulsions, ion propulsions, and they use solar energy. So these type of things they have used, but gravity, I don't think so.
Adding to that, actually, they have also used scramjet technology where you try to extract oxygen from air and use it as an oxidizer for the fuel. So, like this, it has been used.
Right. I mean, that was a totally, very vyomonautical conversation that we just heard. And to us, earthly planets, it did look a bit alien, but nonetheless, I hope the future vyomonauts are getting enough information about it. Interesting. We have Tian from grade 9 next asking the question. Tian, are you there? Otherwise, we have a lot more in the pipeline and waiting to ask. Is Tian ready? Okay, we go to Rishikesh. Rishikesh, you had your question.
Yes, ma'am. It's for
Rishikesh? Okay, Rishikesh wanted to ask, what is the biggest challenge in achieving success according to both of you? The biggest challenge in achieving success for both of you?
The road to success in itself is the biggest challenge.
You mean to say even the thought to make the choice, or after making the choice, the way ahead?
Both.
Can you elaborate on that, Jayashree, so that you know? Why I'm asking you both to elaborate on this is I have a reason, because the millennials, they believe in the instant coffee kind of a philosophy. You do this, you're getting instant results. No, with success, it doesn't work that way. You got to climb up the ladder. You got to take each step at a time. You got to work it, and hard work is the only way out. So I want you both to elaborate in a few minutes. If you can tell the children that, look, you got to put in hard work to achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah, so I can tell you the things I've undergone. Like now when Bharti ma'am read it out, everything seemed like very easy and achievable, but that's not the case. So when I decided to do aeronautical engineering, I was totally discouraged by everyone. Not even a single person told me anything positive. So they were like, you will be the only girl doing that course. And even if you do that course, after 4 years, you won't be able to, get a job. And the negativity was so much, when I decided to join aeronautical. So that's what I meant by, while making the choice, and even after making the choice, you still have a long way to go.
And I'm sure they don't regret.
Yeah, I don't
regret.
Definitely
extremely happy.
No, but to my surprise, when I joined the course, I had 8 other girls along with me who came up with the same
thing.
story. Yeah.
Super.
And each one of us thought that they will be the only girl.
I think the initial fears and apprehensions are much better now, and the parents are also open to ideas of exploring new avenues. So the millennials are at an advantage and at the disadvantage of thinking that everything is going to be available at the click of a button or at the instant coffee kinds. No, we still have to work hard.
No.
Go and click the button.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
Bharti,
like when I did my aeronautical.
Yeah, continue.
Yeah, when I did my aeronautical, there were like around 200 boys, and we were just like 8 or 16 girls. So that was the kind of ratio. And now today, when I go back to my college and then I see now the girls have outnumbered the number of boys.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So, you know, like as Dr. Kalam said, it's in your hands, you know, to make it more popular and, you know, make it reachable to people and make them more aware of the things and the resources that are available in the country. And when I went to NASA for the first time, I was a high school student. And over there, all the scientists were like, they were eminent and they were pioneers in their own field. And I was a high school student. I felt really weird. And I almost felt like, what am I even doing here? Because I didn't have anyone to talk to. And then like, and even, you know, interacting with them, I was little shy because I felt like I'm not in the right place. But then they made me feel so comfortable and they were very accommodative. And then like, then I got used to it. And the struggle didn't even stop there, you know, like wherever I go, I was the only girl. And whichever team I started working, I will be the only girl.
It doesn't
and
matter.
like every time I get projects which are nowhere related to my background.
And I suppose that's where the
so
success
when I
lies.
was doing article, I got a lunar project, and at that time I had no clue about lunar science. So I had to learn everything from the scratch, and they didn't even put me in the engineering team. They put me in the science team. That was the worst part. So I had to learn everything from the scratch, and then I came up. And after that, I went into Mars. So now lunar science is totally different. And now I have to learn about Mars from the scratch again.
Well, I think you are actually sending across signals to these children that be prepared for anything. You will have to meet any kind of a challenge that comes your way, but go at it. Just go meet it.
I want them to be prepared to, you know, take on any challenge, any task, because it's a very competitive world. And unless you stand out, you know, it's very difficult to survive.
I think the competitiveness is visible in the questions that they are coming up with.
Yeah, totally.
Venkat Lakshmi ma'am, your take on the path to success.
Okay. So broadly, it will be determined by how badly you want it.
Lovely.
Because when you really want it, you will find a way. You want to go to a movie and your parents don't allow you. What do? Or you don't have the money. What do? You will find so many ways, you know, to please them, or, you know, miss class and go, or I don't know, whatever else. So when you badly want to play a video game, let's say, you will find all kinds of things. Go to another room with the phone. You know, find times when your parents are not there. All kinds of things. So would you do that for your studies also? So whatever you're interested in, you will try to find a way, even if it is difficult. And that what you're facing as a difficulty won't seem like a difficulty, because you're going for what you like. Okay. However, I will tell you, there are some things irrespective of what you choose. One thing, as she said, is what you think the job may be, it may not be. So you should be prepared, you know, to learn new things, work with different kinds of people, maybe, you know, even acquire new skills that you don't have. Spend ready to, you know, study more or spend extra hours. And overall, I would say your attitude. Because we see people who are graduates from top schools who are having that air on their shoulder that we know everything, and they stop where they are. And there are people who are not from some famous universities, and they will tell, ma'am, we don't know, but you please guide us and we'll learn. And in the next teams, no, we do take them because they're ready to learn, and they also learn and actually come up. So your attitude also matters a lot, your skill set, how you handle people around you, your you know, seniors, your peers, your juniors, your teachers. So, you know, if you are respectful and if you're polite, and if you are not too emotional, like you are balanced, you definitely will find a way forward. That's my take.
Brilliant. I think in a nutshell, she said it all. You want something, you go for it. I've made the choice, so I will make the way for it. Simple. And that brings us to Kavya asking us the next question.
Good evening, ma'am. So my question to you is, actually, many people in the field of science, like people who study cosmology and astronomy, they say that, like, I saw the stars one day, or I looked at the sky full of stars, I looked at the moon, and from that moment on, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So what was like that turning point for you?
Jayeshi, would you like to take that up first, and then we'll go to Venkat?
That happened in my case.
You actually looked at the stars and the moon and you said, okay, this is going to be me?
No, the very first time how I started this subject is from the summer camp, which I was talking about in my school. So
Right.
even over there, what happened was they actually had that camp for students from grade 8 to 12. And I was in 7th grade at that time. And I wasn't even sure whether I'm eligible for that because they wanted some basic knowledge of physics in order to take students for that course, which I didn't have. So I asked my mother to go and ask whether am I allowed to participate in this camp and like, am I eligible? But they said, it's okay, it's fine, let her come. And I went, and again, I was the odd man out in that camp. Because whatever they said, I couldn't even follow. But then later on, what I did is like, I developed my own interest and I started learning. And so we had this India's first women astronomer, Dr. Nirupama Raghavan. So she participated in that camp and she showed me all the stars, all the planets. And when I saw it for the first time, it was really amazing. And I was so fascinated, and I decided, I should really study these objects. And I was very, attracted towards the technology, because on Earth, you can go and you can see places, but you can't really, go to Mars or you go to Saturn and see the surface. But when you got such advancement of technology, like, using remote sensing, when you get images of all these planets and all the other objects in our solar system, and I think it's fantastic, the capabilities of technology. And by sitting over here, you can actually come up with theories about how Mars evolved, how the planets were formed, and how they were, years ago, and how they were, changed over time, and what are the processes that are happening on that particular planet, and how different it is from the Earth. And there are a lot of questions, to look into life forms and all sort of things like this that can be done now. So I was always, I was amazed by such capabilities. So that's what, inspired me more. And also these kind of events that happened in my life, soon after that camp, I started participating in a lot of competitions, and I started learning a lot of things on my own because I didn't have anyone to guide me. And, such subjects are not offered in school curriculum. So I had to go that extra mile, in order to acquire knowledge about these things, which I did. And I started participating in the competitions, and I started winning. And then like everything aligned so well. So I thought, okay, fine, maybe this is my path and I'm on the right track, and I should keep pursuing.
Wow, and today she herself is a star. Venkat Lakshmi ma'am, where did that spark come?
So for me, it was like I did my post-graduation, and then I was wondering whether to go for a PhD. So my professor had actually was ready to take me, but that was not in space, that was in statistics and operations research. However, I was also looking for what are the opportunities we have parallelly. And then I saw that I was looking for jobs which have research. I didn't want to do the same repetitive things, which are typical, like if you build an inventory system, you build an inventory system for 10 companies. I didn't want that kind of a job. I was looking on software and science related. And when I saw this advertisement for ISRO, it was perfect for me. Like it requires a statistics thing, and I realized it's like you have to keep up with new technologies, and as your projects, on different projects, you have to learn new things. So it's only your analytical skill that they see and how you performed, and based on that, you get your next project. So we have had really interesting clients over the time, and some of them in space. The thing is, you do not have that much literature about space as in other things. So like when another center, that is URSC, they had sent a proposal and they wanted everyone's views on it. So no one in Eden had worked on that for a constellation of satellites. So though we worked on applications, we had not worked on a constellation. So my boss called me and said, "Can you give an answer to this?" And coming from one of the major centers of ISRO, and he specifically told me, "I have informed director that you are the one working little related to satellite orbit, so you are the one to answer this." And actually, it took me 3 months to study. I didn't even get enough material in books or in internet. When it goes to core work, lot of studying on my own, lot of going back to my basic physics textbooks and working out the equations. But finally, at the end of 3 months and staying till 8 o'clock in the office, I could come up with an answer that satisfied my director, and that was also appreciated at ISRO level. So it is like you look for what are your interests. You want to do something repetitive, you want to do art, you want to do science, you want to do research, you want to do engineering. Find something that you like and will enjoy, and it will also pay you. So you contribute to yourself and also contribute to society. If you can find such things, that is the best way to go forward.
Yes, it all begins with us. And what I know, Venkat Lakshmi, there was no drama. Everything, however exciting or however magical it would be, she would have that same calm demeanor, and that's, I think, one of the finest qualities she has got. And our future scientist, Harshit, has another question for us.
Ma'am, this question is not much related to science, I guess. It's more about religion and faith. So there's this thought that scientists do not believe in God and they're atheists. So my question to you, both the scientists, are: do you believe in God, and why so?
Okay.
Venkat Lakshmi, would you like to take it first?
Okay, I will take it. I think we can believe in the intelligence of creation, whether you call it God or you call it consciousness or you give it a name. Definitely there is a huge intelligence in creation, in every cell of ours, at every scale, right? Because it seems chaotic, but it is not. There is some underlying pattern, and there is some underlying perfection in the imperfection. So definitely there is an intelligence within each of us, and also in the creation. I do believe this strongly. And coming to scientists and religion, they need not be non-overlapping. Actually, many of our great scientists have finally told that we know so much, we have read so much, now we know that there is so much we don't know. All of them came to that condition. And scientists, actually what they can prove, what they can see only, they can understand, right? But there is so much that you can understand intuitively, there is so much that you can feel that maybe you can't explain with science. Like, let's take the example of Einstein or Newton or many of them. They had suggested theories years ago, and of late only it is getting proved. So where is the science in that, if you ask me? There is a certain science, but there is a certain intuition also involved. And now only they are able to have physical proofs. But otherwise, some of them kind of knew intuitively that what are things and how do they work, like that. So I think they need not be exclusive. You can believe in science, you can believe in consciousness or intelligence or whatever you call it.
I think that's one of the most intelligent answers I've ever heard. And I think the more you know, there will be so much more to learn also, right? Jayashree, can we hear it from you?
Yeah, so I mean, I really believe that there is some superpower which acts on us and on the entire universe. So that can be called as God, or it can be like any other thing. You can call it as whatever you want. But I strongly believe there is something, which is controlling everything. And there are some things which is beyond your capabilities, which you don't have any answers to. So I strongly believe in that way.
Harshit, does that satisfy you?
Yeah, ma'am. It was their scientist's opinion on a normal thing.
Take it from me, there is no atheist.
Yes, ma'am.
Because even in the atheist, he will have certain beliefs, maybe in the consciousness or in the superpower, whatever he may give a name to it. We call him God. We call him a super. He may call it a superpower, but there is no atheist. Okay, coming back to the scientist, I think Gautam is itching to ask you all one more question.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry for asking too many questions, if that is a problem at all.
Not at all, Gautam.
No, it's a pleasure.
No problem. Yeah. So my question is posed to Ms. Sai Venkata Lakshmi. All right. So can we track the locust swarms by using artificial intelligence and machine learning? If we can, how is it being tracked by the color of the locust or the size? That is it being tracked by the color of the locust, or is it being tracked by the size of the locust?
Actually, it depends on the sensor you're using. What is your data? Okay. So if it is visual, then it must be the size. Otherwise, if it is like say thermal, then it must be the temperature. So it all depends on what are the sensors you're using, what is the data you're using for that. Basically, artificial intelligence is supposed to be like it is able to learn complex things. There have always been machine learning algorithms which are able to do simple things. Like let's say you give one object, it is able to learn. Let's take a cat. Okay, you are able to take a photo of a cat and you train enough photos of cats. It is learning. Let's say the cat sits, it won't be able to predict. Okay, the cat turns to a side, you may not be able to predict like that. So now, what is the new thing with artificial intelligence is because the hardware has also grown so much cheaper and more complexity it can handle. So you are able to handle multiple variations of that and learn, and it is able to learn the finer variations of the object. So that way, your detection tasks have greatly improved. It is not 100% also, but it depends on what data, how you want to study. So even what are the data sets that are useful for detection is itself a study, okay, which you have to do first, and then you experiment with different sensors and different methods, and then you would arrive at what is a suitable solution, and then go ahead for your detection. Okay.
Gautam, are you good with the answer, or you want to
yes,
extend the question a bit?
It's good enough. It's
satisfies you.
very,
Fine. Okay, I'm sorry, scientist. I have one more very dramatic question coming from one of our children, Pranay.
Yeah, hi, good evening, ma'am. So this is a question I've always wanted to ask a scientist like you. So right now, all countries, their strength is defined by their weaponry, their military, and all those things. So in the near future, is it possible that space will be weaponized?
We hope not really. That would be very sad for our Earth and the universe. There is a possibility though, but the international treaties actually are totally against it. Okay, we have treaties which say only peaceful use of space, but theoretically it is possible.
Right. Okay, ma'am. So these treaties, do they ban weaponization of space, or do they just cut it down?
No, they prohibit use of space for anything other than peace. However, people can use it indirectly, not for direct attack kind of a thing, but let us say he can say that I am only launching a civilian satellite. Now, once you have a camera in space, what is he using that data for? We don't know. Okay, to that extent, you can use space for your purposes, but you can't really, right now use like throwing a weapon from space, not in that way. Okay.
Okay.
A very peaceful reply to a violent question. Do we have any more questions coming up from my colleagues, my teachers, Radha ma'am, Susan ma'am? Any of the children wanting to ask? Children, don't worry about how simple or how silly the question is. Just ask. They are here for us, and it's so nice to talk to such nice people. Okay, we have the philosophical Harshit back again.
I've been reading about something called a graviton, and then about why it's unprovable, but I'm not able to grasp the concept of a graviton and why it's unprovable, ma'am. So could you enlighten me on that? And in like common terms, because I'm not that. I mean, I haven't learned a lot about it.
Yeshi, please.
Yeshi, graviton.
The question is to me.
Yeah. Harshit, why don't you just pile up all your questions and mail it to me? I'll mail it to both the scientists so that they can get back to us.
Okay, ma'am.
Honestly. Or Jeshi, would you like to take this up?
Yeah, graviton, I've never really worked anything related to that. So I don't want to comment, because that's not my area of expertise. So I wouldn't say something which is not true.
Good enough. Alethea?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is to Jayashree, ma'am. Ma'am, apart from astrophysics and planetary sciences, you've also been a researcher. So, what kind of response have you gotten to your research and your findings?
The response, as in like, in what way you ask from people, or in terms of significant findings where you publish in a very high impact journals, or in what way, what type of recognition do you expect?
Ma'am, like from common, like if it's published, if it's like significant findings in that way, like how much it has affect the people and how much it has made an importance like that.
So for people, and you mean for common people?
Yes, ma'am.
You're asking, right? Yes, so that impact, I will actually disappoint you the answer, because it's not going to create a huge impact for the common people over here. It's only for the scientific community, the researches which I have done, because it's not involving any of the things on Earth. So I can tell you about the significant findings that I have done on two projects. Like for instance, if you take Mars, so one of my project involved working on the hydrology of Mars. So I have to find when was water flowing on the surface of Mars, like how it is flowing on Earth. Right now you see water, right? So how it was on Mars. So I had to do modeling of such stuff. And so finally I came up with the conclusion that, the water was flowing 3.6 billion years ago. And the current Mars, which we see today, will be the future of our Earth after, so many billion years. So Mars was once like our Earth, and now it has lost everything. So the activities in the channels and the water flow, everything was, it was stopped around 3.6 billion years ago. So that was one thing which I found out in my research on Mars, because I had to study each and every channel on the surface of Mars. And I have to see how the ages were and how many craters were there. And based on that, we have to come up with all these statistics, and then you have to, there are a whole lot of stuff which is going on behind, and then you finally come up with this number, and then you show that, the water was flowing like this in Mars so many years ago. So this is something, very significant. So if you come up with something like this, and then you will be able to understand the origin and the evolution of that planet. So now we have quite a good understanding about Mars, but we don't have much understanding about the other planets. Because if you see Mercury or Venus, which is very close to the sun, and the next nearby planet we have is only Mars. And which is having a similar conditions like our Earth in terms of density, in terms of gravity, or any parameters if you take, it's very similar to our, hosting life. So that makes it very interesting. Water on Mars, and even now they are trapped inside, and like they're in the form of ice, and they are form of these kind of deposits. So there are many things which are coming up every day. So these significant findings are very important for the scientific community, and to for the future. So these type of things only you can do on this subject. So, but if you are working on the Earth, and you can expect the benefit to be for the common people. So, because a lot of people have asked me this question, you always work on the space objects, you work on the other planets, but you never work on Earth. So people always tell me that, and you're not doing anything to the common people. So because of that, I have taken up projects. And I have been working on the Himalayan project, where I'm working on water budgeting, and also I'm working for improving the livelihood of the people living in the mountain region. So I'm doing some socioeconomic surveys to improve their quality of life, and also increasing the flora and fauna in our Himalayan region. So these are some of the projects which I have taken up recently in the last few years, so that I can contribute to the society and to our country.
There's so much more to this scientist.
Thank you
There's
so much.
So much more to this scientist who's talking to us, right, Jayashree?
Never ends, ma'am. It never ends. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, to both of you, one final word to the students of Hindustan International. Venkatalakshmi, please.
Chase your dream, but choose your dream wisely.
Very important. Make the right choice. Because you've got to chase it. Nobody else is going to chase it for you. Jai Shri.
So yeah, if you all are planning to pursue in this field, earth and planetary sciences or astrophysics or whatever it is, just make sure that you choose the right path, because in each subject there are a lot of other areas which are quite interesting. So you can actually identify which area you want to specialize, and then you can focus on it. And you should also learn to treat your success and your failure equally.
Very important.
So
Very important.
That's very important, and you should never be discouraged. And patience is the key.
Wonderful. It's so good to hear these words of wisdom which are universal and all time. And somewhere today I really feel that Dr. Kalam must be really blessing all of us, because commemorating his birthday we are discussing such wonderful things: science, spirituality, the future ahead, the world ahead. And believe me, on behalf of all of us at Hindustan, I think it's just been so great having you on board talking to our children. But before I could complete, I think we have our teacher, Ms. Beena, who wants to say something.
Yes, good evening, Jayashree and Venkatalakshmi ma'am. I used to regret that I could never meet Abdul Kalam sir, because whenever I speak to children in some context, when we speak to children, if we speak about Mahatma Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, they don't know. But if Kalam ji, everyone, even small children, they say, yes, ma'am, we know. The spirit that they had, and especially today, I'm so proud that 2020, he had lots of visions, and when he's not alive, but still I could really listen to a student who met Abdul Kalam, and you were talking, sharing your experience to our children, and many children were coming up with lots of questions, and I'm so proud that, for lifelong, as long as I take class for my children, I have a living example as Jayashree and Venkatalakshmi ma'am, and we are so grateful now. Children are so blessed, and as Bhadyalakshmi ma'am said, somewhere today our children and our school is blessed with Abdul Kalam ji. There is no doubt. So, and thank you, Bharti ma'am. It's a wonderful day today, with the Navaratri starting and Abdul Kalam's day. Thank you so much.
We must thank the management of Hindustan International School for providing us with this opportunity. And Venkatalakshmi and Jayashree, the journey has just begun. And for all if my children have any questions to ask, or if they want your guidance and mentoring, I'm sure they will have it all.
Yes, definitely.
So on behalf
of actually, it's a pleasure for me too, and I'm sure for Jayashree also to be here. And the children have really kept us active. That is nice to see, because in work we will see limited questions. Here it's like you can get shot at from anywhere, and your people have been really good at that. So very good, children. Wishing you success ahead, and all the teachers and the management. Thank you all for a lively audience.
So on behalf of all of us again, a heartfelt gratitude. And children, keep chasing your dreams, make the right choice, and remember the journey is yours. Wishing everyone a wonderful evening and a great life ahead. God bless everyone, and God bless Hindustan International Schools. Thank you.
Thank you.